The alarms tear through the palace before I even open my eyes. I am on my feet before the second signal finishes echoing off the stone walls. 300 years of instinct pulls me toward the war chamber, my claws scraping against the floor, my heart pounding harder than it has in decades. Saren meets me at the door, his face pale, his voice shaking. "A fleet has entered the outer ring," he says. "Voranthi ships. 12 of them. They will reach the palace in 6 hours. 6 hours. I press a hand against my chest, against the armor that has sat broken and useless on a stand in my vault for 3 centuries. The Ember Scale Aegis, the only thing that has ever truly protected a queen of my bloodline in open battle, and it has been silent, cracked, and powerless since long before I was born. "Get the human engineer," I say. "Now." Saren blinks at me. "She only arrived yesterday. She has not even finished touring the vault. I do not care. Get her." He runs. I stand alone in the war chamber, staring at the display that shows 12 ships crawling toward us like a slow and patient disease. The Voranthi have wanted this palace for generations. They have wanted the old Queen's Forge, the ancient records, the last pieces of technology from a war that ended before their grandparents were hatched. They have never had the nerve to attack directly. Until now. Someone has told them my armor does not work. Someone inside my own walls. I think of every face in this palace, every guard, every advisor, every servant who has passed through the vault over the years. Any one of them could have whispered the truth to the wrong ears in exchange for coin, or safety, or simple fear of what the Voranthi might do to anyone who stayed loyal to a queen with no real defense. I cannot afford to chase that thought right now. A betrayal solved too late is still a betrayal, but a battle lost while hunting for a traitor is a battle lost for nothing. I do not have time to hunt for a traitor. I have time for one thing only, and that is standing in a vault 2 floors below me, cracked down the middle, waiting for a miracle that has never come. Nora arrives with grease still on her hands from whatever she was doing on her ship. Her hair is pulled back in a rush, and her eyes are wide, but she does not look afraid. She looks awake, the way a person looks when they realize the day just changed completely. "Someone said there is a fleet," she says. "Someone also said you need me. I do not understand why." "Because you are the only person in this palace who has ever looked at broken things and asked how to make them whole, instead of asking who to blame for breaking them." She follows me down to the vault without another question. I appreciate that about her more than I have ever appreciated anything about diplomacy. Along the corridor, we pass frightened staff carrying supplies toward the lower shelters, children of the palace kitchen staff clutching their parents' hands, and a pair of old advisors arguing loudly about whether to send a message of surrender before the fleet even arrives. I ignore them all. There is only one path forward, and it runs straight through the vault. The Aegis stands where it has always stood, split down the center, a jagged seam of dull metal running from the collar to the waist. I have stared at this crack every day for years. I know its shape better than I know my own reflection. Nora crouches in front of it, running her fingers along the broken line, just as she did months ago when I first showed it to her people. Only this time there is no leisure in her movements. There is urgency. "You need this working in 6 hours," she says. It is not a question. "Yes. For a real fight, not for show. Yes." She exhales slowly, and for one terrible moment, I think she is going to tell me it cannot be done. Instead, she stands up straight and looks at me with a strange, fierce calm. "Then we are not fixing it the slow way, we are fixing it the smart way." I do not understand what she means, but I nod anyway, because there is no other choice left. She asks for tools I have never heard of. She asks for metal samples from 3 different eras of our history, pulled from the archive in a rush by 2 nervous archivists who keep glancing at the ceiling, as if the Voranthi ships might crash through it at any moment. She asks for heat, but not fire. She asks for pressure, but not force. She works with her hands the way our ancestors used to work, not with songs or rituals, but with patience and precision, even while the countdown on the far wall keeps sliding toward 0. An hour passes, then 2. Saren returns twice with updates that make my blood run cold. The Voranthi ships have increased speed. Whatever they believe about my armor, they are moving with the confidence of people who know they are not walking into danger. They know, I say quietly, watching Nora work. Somehow, they know the armor has never truly healed. She does not look up from the metal in her hands. Then let us make sure that whatever they know stops being true. At the 2-hour mark, a runner arrives from the eastern watchtower, with news that only tightens the knot already sitting in my chest. The Voranthi fleet has slowed its approach, not out of caution, but to allow a smaller scout vessel to slip ahead of the main group. Scout vessels do not carry weapons. They carry listening equipment. Someone on that ship is likely confirming, in real time, whether my armor still hangs broken in its vault. They will know the moment it starts working, I say. If they see it glow, if they detect any change in its signature, they may attack immediately instead of waiting for the full fleet. Nora does not look up from her work. Then we make sure nothing leaks until the very last piece is locked into place. Not a spark, not a shimmer, nothing they can read from a distance. She adjusts her approach slightly, shielding the metal with a spare plate salvaged from a training set, working now in near darkness rather than risk even the faintest glow escaping through the vault's high windows. It slows her down, and I feel every extra minute pass like a blade dragging across old scar tissue. At the 3-hour mark, disaster strikes. The base metal she has been shaping cracks under the pressure she is applying, splitting into 2 useless halves with a sound like a snapped bone. She swears under her breath, sets it aside, and immediately reaches for another sample without missing a beat. That was one of only 2 pieces from that era, Saren says, horror creeping into his voice. If this one fails too, there is nothing else to try. Then it will not fail, Nora says, and there is a strange steadiness in her voice, the kind that makes even me believe her. I watch her hands shake slightly from exhaustion, yet her focus never breaks. She reminds me of soldiers I have commanded, the ones who keep moving long after their bodies want to stop, because stopping means losing everything they came to protect. At the 4-hour mark, something changes in the metal. I see it before she says a word. The dull gray surface begins to shimmer faintly, the same way the old records describe the founding queen's forge glowing when true work was being done inside it. It is responding, I whisper. It was always going to respond, Nora says, though sweat now lines her forehead. It just needed someone to stop treating it like a wound and start treating it like an unfinished puzzle. The Voranthi fleet crosses into visual range on the tracking display. 5 hours have passed. 1 remains. Panic threatens to rise in my chest, but I force it down. A queen who panics gives her enemies exactly what they want. Nora works faster now, her movements sharp and sure despite the pressure crushing down on both of us. She fits the newly shaped metal into the broken seam, testing the angle, adjusting, testing again. Twice it does not fit. Twice she does not waste a single second on frustration, simply resetting and trying once more. With 30 minutes left, the palace sensors detect weapons charging aboard the Voranthi ships. Saren's voice cracks as he reports it. They are preparing to fire on the outer wall. Hold them as long as you can with the defense grid, I order. Do not engage directly. We need every second. He rushes out, and it is only Nora and I left in the vault, the countdown numbers glowing red on the far display, each one ticking away a piece of the future. Talk to me, I say, needing something other than silence and dread filling the space between us. How did you know this could even be fixed? She does not stop working as she answers. Because everyone before me treated this armor like a sacred object instead of a machine. Sacred things are not allowed to be flawed. Machines are allowed to be unfinished. The moment I stopped worrying about disrespecting history, I could actually see what was wrong with it. And what was wrong with it? The founding queen ran out of time before the war started. She never finished sealing this section. Everyone who came after assumed it broke in battle, so they searched for damage. There was no damage to find. There was only an unfinished job. With 10 minutes left, the palace shakes from a weapon strike against the outer defense grid. Dust falls from the vault ceiling. Nora barely flinches, her hands steady as she presses the final piece into place. Almost, she says through gritted teeth. Almost there. 5 minutes. The scene glows brighter, the ancient metal responding to her work like it has been waiting 300 years for someone patient enough to finish the job properly. 3 minutes. Another strike hits the palace, closer this time. Alarms blare through every hallway, and I can hear distant shouting from soldiers rushing to defensive positions they have trained for but never truly needed until today. 1 minute. Nora steps back from the armor, chest heaving, sweat soaking through her shirt. It is done, she says. I do not know if it will hold under real combat. I have never tested this, but it is whole. I do not wait for reassurance. I strip off my ceremonial robe and step into the armor for the first time in my life, as something more than a broken symbol. The plates close around me with a soft final click, the same sound I imagine the founding queen heard the day she first wore it, before war interrupted her work and stole this feeling from every queen who came after her. The weight settles differently than I expected. Lighter, balanced, alive. I do not have time to marvel at it. The palace shudders under another impact, and Saren's voice crackles through the comm system, tight with fear. They are breaching the eastern gate. Get everyone to the lower shelters, I order. Nora, go with them. She looks at me, and for a moment I expect an argument. Instead, she simply nods and grabs a spare toolkit from the table, slinging it over her shoulder like a soldier grabbing a weapon. "I built it," she says. "I am not hiding while you find out if it works." There is no time to argue. I lead her upward through the corridors, toward the eastern gate where the sound of impacts grows louder with every step, until we reach the courtyard just as the massive doors buckle inward under sustained pressure. The first Voranthi soldiers pour through the breach, and for one heartbeat, everything in me expects the same fear I have carried for 3 centuries, the fear of standing exposed and unprotected behind armor that has never truly worked. Instead, I feel something unfamiliar: confidence. I step forward, and the armor moves with me exactly as the songs always claimed it should, deflecting the first strike aimed at my shoulder as though it were nothing more than a gust of wind. The soldiers hesitate, clearly expecting the same broken relic every spy and rumor has described to them for years. That hesitation is all I need. I do not fight with rage. I fight with control, using the armor's restored strength to hold the line at the breach, buying time for the defense grid to reroute power and seal the gap properly. Every movement feels different than I remember, faster, sharper, protected in a way I have never experienced in real combat. Behind me, I hear Nora shouting instructions to a group of engineers scrambling to reinforce a secondary barrier, directing them with the same calm focus she used while working on the armor itself. She does not fight, she fixes, and somehow, in this moment, that feels just as important as anything happening at the breach. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours, though the chamber display later shows the entire battle lasted less than 20 minutes. The Voranthi commander, realizing the armor that was supposed to be broken is very much whole, finally orders a retreat rather than risk losing more soldiers to a queen who should have been an easy target. Their ships pull back from the palace, retreating into the outer ring and eventually beyond, their plan unraveling the moment their intelligence proved wrong. Word spreads through the palace, even before the last Voranthi ship clears the outer ring. Soldiers who moments ago braced for what they believed would be a hopeless defense now stand tall along the broken gate, some laughing in the disbelieving way people laugh when danger passes faster than their fear can catch up. Somewhere behind me I hear the 2 old advisors who had argued about surrender now arguing just as loudly about who first believed the armor might actually hold, each one insisting they never doubted it for a moment. Silence falls over the courtyard, broken only by the sound of dust settling and soldiers catching their breath. I remove the Aegis slowly, staring at the seam that no longer glows with useless dormant light, but instead sits dark and solid, exactly as it should. Whole, finished, real. Nora walks over, exhaustion written across every line of her face. Yet there is something else there too. Pride maybe, or simple relief. "It held," she says. "It held," I agree, "because you refused to treat it like something too important to question." She smiles faintly. Everything important eventually needs someone willing to ask better questions about it. Even legends. I look around at the courtyard, at soldiers helping each other stand, at the broken gate already being cleared for repair, and at the woman beside me who arrived only yesterday as a stranger, and somehow became the reason my people are still standing tonight. "You will stay," I say. "It is not quite an order and not quite a request." "I was already planning to," she replies. "Someone needs to make sure this armor keeps working, and honestly, I would like to see what else in this palace everyone has given up on fixing." For the first time in 300 years, I laugh, truly laugh, standing in a courtyard filled with dust and dawn light, wearing armor that finally protects me the way it was always meant to. Word of what happened here will travel fast. The Voranthi will think twice before testing my walls again. Other queens across the old alliances will ask how a piece of broken legend became whole again in a matter of hours instead of centuries. I already know what I will tell them. I will tell them the answer never came from magic or ritual or ancient song. It came from a stranger who looked at something everyone else called perfect and simply asked what was still missing. And I will tell them that sometimes, the greatest strength a queen can have is the humility to let someone new finish what her ancestors never had the time to complete. Later that night, once the gate is patched and the wounded have been tended, I find Nora sitting alone on the courtyard steps, staring up at the stars as though searching for the direction her ship first came from. I sit beside her without a word, and for a long while neither of us speaks. "You could have stayed hidden," I say eventually. "You could have let your people call this a Draconis matter, and nothing more." "I could have," she agrees. "But I did not come this far across the sky just to watch from a shelter while something I built either worked or failed. Some things you have to see through to the end, whatever that end turns out to be." I look down at the armor resting beside me, dark and quiet now, finally at peace after 300 years of silence. It no longer feels like a monument to something broken. It feels like proof that even the oldest wounds can be closed, given the right hands and the courage to try. Then stay, I tell her again, this time with no uncertainty in my voice at all. Not for one night or one battle, but for as long as there are things in this palace still waiting to be finished. She smiles, tired but genuine, and looks back up at the stars. I think I would like that, she says. There is always something worth fixing. And for the first time since I was old enough to understand what my family had lost, I believe her completely.